The sun was still asleep when Michael Anderson placed his feet on the cold floor of the porch. At 32 years old, he carried on his shoulders the weight of 3 generations of ranchers, each leaving their mark on the red soil of Warm Springs. Sunrise Ranch stretched before him like a golden sea of promises, where each dawn brought the certainty that this piece of the world belonged to him as much as he belonged to this place. "Good morning, boss," greeted Joe Bennett, the foreman, who had worked on the ranch since before Michael was born. His calloused hands held a steaming cup of coffee in the morning air. "Morning, Joe. How are the pastures by the new fence?" "Growing beautifully. Last week's rain worked miracles over there." Michael nodded, but his mind was already flying beyond conventional pastures. For months an idea had consumed him, transforming Sunrise Ranch into something greater. It wasn't enough to be just another cattle ranch in rural Georgia. He wanted to create a legacy that would honor the Anderson name definitively. Mrs. Cindy, the housekeeper who had looked after the main house for 15 years, appeared on the porch with a tray. Her gray hair was tied in an impeccable bun, as always. "Your coffee, Michael. And don't forget that today is the auction day in Pine Ridge." "I won't forget, Mrs. Cindy, thank you. The auction. That would be the opportunity Michael had been waiting for. Weeks of research had led him to information about exceptional bloodline animals that would be offered at the event. Horses. Not just any horses, but specimens that could be the beginning of a new era for Sunrise Ranch. While drinking his coffee, Michael observed the field stretching as far as the eye could see. His grandfather had bought these lands with the sweat of manual labor. His father expanded the property and modernized the cattle breeding. Now it was his turn to write the next chapter of the family history. "Joe, have you heard about breeding competition horses?" The foreman scratched his graying beard thoughtfully. "I have. Fine business, isn't it? They say a good animal is worth more than a house in town." "Exactly. And I believe we have everything we need here. Good pasture, clean water, favorable climate. All that's missing is the right animal to start." Mrs. Cindy, who was listening to the conversation while collecting the empty cup, frowned. "Michael, your father and grandfather built all this with cattle. Why change something that already works?" The question was fair, but Michael had a ready answer. "It's not about changing, Mrs. Cindy, it's about evolving. The cattle stays, but horses could be the differentiator that will make Sunrise Ranch known throughout the country." Hours later, Michael drove down the dusty road toward Pine Ridge. The October heat made the air dense, but his anxiety was greater than any discomfort. There was something in the air, a feeling that this day would change everything. The auction took place in a rustic pavilion on the outskirts of town. Breeders from all over the region gathered there, some with traditional hats, others wearing clothes that betrayed urban life. Michael observed each animal presented, but none awakened the feeling he was looking for, until she appeared. The black mare entered the arena with a presence that silenced conversations. Her coat shone like silk under the pavilion lights, and her eyes carried an intelligence that Michael had never seen in any animal. She moved with natural elegance, each step calculated, each movement carrying purpose. "Star," announced the auctioneer, 5 years old, complete documentation, proven noble lineage. Michael felt his heart race. This was her. He was absolutely certain. The auction was competitive, but Michael didn't back down. When the hammer fell for the last time, Star was his. The investment was high, but he knew it was worth every penny. As he finalized the purchase, an elderly man approached him. "You bought a special animal, young man. Thank you. Are you the former owner?" "I am, and I want you to know that Star isn't an ordinary mare. There's something about her that, well, that modern man doesn't understand anymore." Michael laughed, thinking the man was just being dramatic. "She is truly beautiful. I'm sure she'll be perfect for my plans." The old man looked at him seriously. "It's not about beauty, son, it's about something greater. Take good care of her, and when the time comes, you'll understand." Without further explanation, the man walked away, leaving Michael intrigued. But the euphoria of the purchase soon swept away any concern. He had his mare. Now the real journey would begin. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. 2 weeks had passed since Star's arrival at Sunrise Ranch. The mare had adapted perfectly to the new environment, grazing peacefully in the greenest fields of the property. Michael observed her elegant movements every morning, confirming his certainty that he had made the right choice. The old stable had been completely renovated. New stalls were built with modern materials, an adequate ventilation system, and floors that ensured maximum comfort for the animals. Joe Bennett supervised every detail of the work, although he still expressed skepticism about the project. "Boss, I won't lie, this competition horse business still makes me a bit suspicious," commented the foreman while checking the stall locks. "But if you believe in it, I'm in." "You can trust me, Joe. In a few years, Sunrise Ranch will be a reference in horse breeding in the Southeast." Michael had spent entire nights researching equine artificial insemination. The books and articles he studied led him to the name of Dr. Samuel Foster, a specialized veterinarian who worked with the most advanced reproductive techniques. His resume was impressive: international training, work at famous horse farms, and a reputation for efficiency that reached even the most demanding breeders. The first contact with Dr. Foster was by phone. His voice sounded professional, but there was something in it that Michael couldn't define, a coldness that went beyond technical behavior. "Mr. Anderson, I'll receive the mayor's documents by email. If everything is in order, I can schedule a visit to evaluate the property's conditions," said the veterinarian, showing no enthusiasm. "Perfect, doctor. I'm sure you'll be satisfied with our structure." 3 days later, Dr. Foster arrived at the ranch driving a black SUV with medical equipment in the trunk. He was a tall, thin man with dark hair combed back and eyes that seemed to analyze everything with surgical precision. He wore an immaculate white coat and carried a leather briefcase that he didn't let go of for even a moment. "Good afternoon, Dr. Foster. Welcome to Sunrise Ranch." "Good afternoon," he responded dryly, shaking Michael's hand with measured strength. "I'd like to examine the mare first, then we'll evaluate the environment." They walked to the stable in silence. Dr. Foster observed every detail of the construction, making notes in a small notebook. When they reached Star, something changed in his posture. The veterinarian stopped abruptly, staring at the mare with an intensity that made Michael uncomfortable. "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to Michael. "Any problem, doctor?" "No, just she's truly exceptional. May I examine her?" During the examination, Dr. Foster remained in absolute silence. His hands moved with technical precision, but Michael noticed that he avoided looking directly into Star's eyes. When he finished, he stored his equipment with mechanical movements. "The mare is in perfect condition. We can proceed with the procedure tomorrow morning." "Excellent. And what about the chosen stallion?" Dr. Foster hesitated for a moment before answering. "I already have the appropriate genetic material, a specimen of special lineage. I'm sure the result will be satisfactory." That night, Michael could barely sleep. Anxiety mixed with a strange feeling that something important was about to happen. Mrs. Cindy noticed his restlessness during dinner. "Michael, are you okay? You seem worried." "I'm just anxious, that's all. Tomorrow our breeding project officially begins." "And that doctor? I found him a bit strange. Very quiet." "Specialized professionals are like that, Mrs. Cindy. What matters is his competence." The next morning, Dr. Foster arrived punctually at 7 o'clock. He brought equipment that Michael had never seen before: sophisticated electronic devices, vials with substances that shimmered under the light, and instruments that seemed to belong more to a scientific laboratory than to a veterinary clinic. The procedure lasted almost 2 hours. Dr. Foster worked in silence, concentrated like a surgeon performing a delicate operation. Star remained surprisingly calm throughout the process, as if she understood the importance of the moment. When he finished, the veterinarian organized his equipment with nervous movements. His hands trembled slightly, and drops of sweat ran down his forehead despite the cool morning climate. "Done," he said, avoiding looking at Michael. The procedure was a success. When will we know if it worked? In a few weeks, but I'm sure it did, he answered, carefully storing an empty vial. Mr. Anderson, I need to make an important recommendation. Of course, Doctor. Keep the mare's environment as stable as possible. Avoid sudden changes in routine, unnecessary visitors, any kind of stress, and if you notice any unusual behavior, let me know immediately. The seriousness in his voice made Michael frown. Behavior like what? Dr. Foster hesitated as if carefully choosing his words. Anything that seems abnormal. Just call me if that happens. After receiving payment, Dr. Foster left quickly, leaving only a card with his phone number. Michael tried to contact him twice in the following weeks, but the calls were not answered. When he decided to look for him in person, he discovered that his office was closed, and no one could provide information about his whereabouts. Dr. Samuel Foster had simply disappeared, as if he had never existed. The first 3 weeks after the procedure passed normally. Star maintained her usual routine, grazing during the day and resting in the stall at night. Michael checked her condition daily, anxious for any sign that the insemination had been successful. It was Joe Bennett who first noticed the changes. "Boss, there's something strange with Star," he said one morning, taking off his hat and scratching his head. Her appetite doubled overnight. Michael observed the mare devouring the feed with a voracity that wasn't characteristic of her. In a few minutes, she consumed what would normally last hours. "It could be a sign of pregnancy, Joe. It's normal for appetite to increase." "Maybe, but I've never seen a mare eat like that. Seems like she's been hungry for weeks." In the following days, Star's eating behavior became even more peculiar. Periods of voracious appetite alternated with episodes where she completely refused food, sniffing the feed as if something in it bothered her. Mrs. Cindy also began to express concern. "Michael, that mare isn't well. Yesterday afternoon, when I took a snack to Joe at the stable, she was standing in the middle of the stall, staring at nothing. She stayed like that for almost an hour." "Maybe she was just resting." Mrs. Cindy. "Not resting, Michael. It was different. Her eyes were open, but it seemed like she was seeing something we couldn't see." Michael tried to maintain rationality, attributing everything to hormonal changes of pregnancy. But deep down, Dr. Foster's words of warning echoed in his mind. Any unusual behavior. The first truly inexplicable manifestation happened on a new moon night. Joe Bennett was doing his usual rounds when something made him stop abruptly in front of the stable. The next morning, he sought out Michael with a troubled countenance. "Boss, I need to tell you something, but you'll think I'm going crazy." "Go ahead, Joe." "Last night, when I passed by the stable, I saw a blue light coming from Star's stall. Faint, but it was there. I thought it was a reflection of the moon, but the night was dark." Michael frowned. "A reflection from some equipment, perhaps?" "No equipment was on, boss. And the light, it pulsed, as if it were alive." "Are you sure of what you saw?" Joe Bennett lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable. "I've got 40 years of ranch experience, Michael. I know every sound, every shadow, every reflection that can appear around here. That wasn't natural." That night, Michael decided to keep his own vigil. He positioned himself in a chair on the porch, from where he had a direct view of the stable. For hours he observed without noticing anything unusual. He was about to give up when, around 3 in the morning, he noticed a subtle glow emanating from the cracks in the building. He got up slowly and walked to the stable. The blue-greenish light was real, though almost imperceptible. It seemed to emerge from the floor of the stall where Star was resting. The mare was lying down, but her eyes remained open, fixed on a point high above. "Star," he called softly. She turned her head in his direction, and for a moment Michael had the impression that her eyes shone with the same blue tone as the mysterious light. The moment lasted only seconds, but it was enough to make his heart race. The sea. Next morning, other strange signs began to manifest. The plants around the stable showed accelerated growth. Grass that barely reached the ankles the previous week now reached the knees. The rose bushes that Mrs. Cindy had planted near the building bloomed out of season, displaying more vibrant colors than normal. "Michael, have you noticed the plants?" asked Mrs. Cindy, pointing to the gardens around the stable. "I have. Maybe it's the new irrigation system." "It's not irrigation. And there's more. The farm cats won't come near the stable, not even Thunder." Thunder was the property's German shepherd, courageous and protective. If even he avoided the area, there was reason for concern. 2 weeks later, electronic devices began to malfunction. The stable radio produced only static when turned on. Michael's cell phone lost signal whenever he approached Star's stall. The building's lights burned out with inexplicable frequency. It was then that Michael decided to seek professional help. He tried calling Dr. Foster countless times, but the phones remained silent. His internet searches revealed no trace of the veterinarian. It was as if he had never existed. Without alternatives, Michael contacted Dr. Helen Sullivan, a local veterinarian known for her competence and discretion. Helen had graduated from the University of Georgia and had been serving the region for 10 years, earning the trust of local breeders. "Dr. Sullivan, I need you to examine my mare. There are some peculiarities I'd like to discuss with you." "Of course, Michael, I can come tomorrow morning." "I'd prefer if it were a private consultation, if possible." "No problem. You can count on me." That night, Michael made one last round by the stable. Star was standing, motionless, staring fixedly at the stall door. When he approached, she slowly turned her head and her eyes reflected the flashlight's beam with a glow that didn't seem natural. For the first time since the mare's arrival, Michael felt fear, not of Star, but of what was growing inside her. The words of the former owner returned to his mind. "There's something about her that modern man doesn't understand anymore." Now he was beginning to suspect that those words were more than superstition. They were a warning that had come too late to be understood. Dr. Helen Sullivan arrived at Sunrise Ranch on a cloudy November morning. She was a middle-aged woman, with brown hair tied in a ponytail, and attentive eyes that conveyed professional confidence. She carried a traditional veterinary bag and a portable ultrasound device that she had brought especially for the consultation. "Good morning, Michael. How long has Star been pregnant?" "Approximately 2 months, doctor, but some things have been happening that concern me." As they walked to the stable, Michael reported the changes in the mare's behavior, deliberately omitting the more inexplicable aspects. Helen listened attentively, asking technical questions and making notes in her notebook. "Changes in appetite are normal during pregnancy. Let's do a complete examination to assess her general condition." When they reached Star's stall, Helen paused for a moment, observing the mare with an intrigued expression. "She's truly magnificent. So I rarely see animals with such presence." During the physical examination, Star remained strangely cooperative, allowing Helen to perform all procedures without resistance. The veterinarian checked heart rate, reflexes, temperature, and general vital signs. "Physically, she's perfect. Let's move on to the ultrasound to check the foal's development." Helen set up the equipment efficiently, applying the conductive gel to Star's abdomen. The first images appeared on the monitor with normal clarity, showing expected internal structures, but as the veterinarian moved the transducer, her expression gradually changed. "This is strange," she murmured, frowning. "What is it, doctor?" "The images aren't defined as they should be. There seems to be some interference." On the monitor, the shapes moved in an unnatural way. What should be the clear contour of an equine fetus appeared as a pulsating mass with undefined edges. Helen adjusted the device's controls several times, but the images remained confused. "I've never seen anything like this," she said, clearly disturbed. "It's as if something were interfering with the signal." "Could it be a defect in the equipment?" "No. This device works perfectly. I used it yesterday on another mare without problems. Suddenly the screen began to flicker. The images distorted, forming patterns that didn't correspond to any known anatomy. For a few seconds, something that seemed to pulse with its own light appeared in the center of the image, before the equipment emitted a sharp noise and completely shut down. What the hell was that? Helen tried to restart the device, but it didn't respond. Michael, I need to take this equipment to the clinic in Warm Springs. We have a more powerful device there that can give us clearer answers. Of course, Doctor. When can we do that? Tomorrow morning. I'll schedule a special time to ensure privacy. That afternoon, after Helen's departure, Michael noticed that symbols drawn with coarse salt had appeared again behind the stable. Mrs. Cindy denied any knowledge of them, and Joe Bennett swore he hadn't seen them the day before. Boss, these drawings, my grandmother used to say they were protection signs, said the foreman, observing the symbols with respect. Someone is trying to protect something around here. The next morning, Michael and Helen transported Star to the veterinary clinic. The animal behaved calmly during the trip, as if she understood the importance of the moment. Helen's clinic was modern and well-equipped. The fixed ultrasound device was significantly more advanced than the portable one used at the ranch. Helen prepared everything carefully, hoping to obtain clearer images. What happened exceeded all expectations of strangeness. The first images appeared normal, but quickly began to distort. Impossible shapes materialized on the screen, pulsating with their own rhythm. What should have been a common fetus presented contours that defied known anatomy. "My God," whispered Helen, her eyes fixed on the monitor. "This is impossible." The images showed something that seemed to possess equine characteristics, but with elements that didn't belong to any known species. Luminous structures appeared and disappeared, as if the developing being partially existed in another dimension. Suddenly, the screen exploded in white light, and the device emitted a deafening sound before permanently shutting down. "Helen, what did you see?" The veterinarian remained silent for long moments, her hands trembling slightly. "Michael, I need to make a call in private." She moved away to the office, closing the door. Michael could hear only fragments of the conversation. "Never. Seen anything like it? Needs to be investigated. So can they come today?" When she returned, Helen avoided looking directly at Michael. "Let's go back to the ranch. I need to think about what to do next." During the journey back, 2 dark cars followed them at a discreet distance. Michael noticed them in the rearview mirrors, but preferred not to comment. Helen seemed lost in thought, occasionally murmuring to herself. Back at Sunrise Ranch, the cars parked at the property entrance. 4 men in dark suits got out of the vehicles and walked determinedly toward the main house. "Michael Anderson?" asked the one who appeared to be the leader of the group, displaying an official identification. "We need to examine your mare." "Under what authority?" "Federal Health Authority. We've received reports of anomalies that may represent a risk to public health." Michael looked at Helen, who averted her gaze, clearly uncomfortable. "I won't allow any examination without a court order. Mr. Anderson, I can assure you it will be easier if you cooperate voluntarily, and I can assure you that you won't." "Examine my animal without appropriate legal documentation?" The men looked at each other, clearly displeased. The leader made a note in a small notebook. "Very well, Mr. Anderson. We'll have our documentation soon, but know that this won't end here." After the official's departure, Michael confronted Helen. "Was it you who called them?" "Michael, you don't understand. What I saw in those images, where it's not natural, it could be dangerous." "Dangerous to whom?" "To all of us. There are things that science still doesn't understand, and when they appear, it's necessary to investigate." That night, Michael stood guard personally. He knew the men would return, and this time they might not respect his refusal. As he watched, the moonlit stable, a single certainty crystallized in his mind. Whatever the cost, he would protect Star and what she carried. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. Will continue. The following days were tense at Sunrise Ranch. Michael knew the men in suits would return, and the pressure of waiting left all the property's residents on high alert. Mrs. Cindy prepared meals in silence. Joe Bennett checked the fences with doubled frequency, and Michael could barely sleep. It was Mrs. Cindy who suggested seeking out Mrs. Lucy. "Michael, I've known this woman for more than 20 years. She understands things that doctors don't understand. If something different is happening with Star, she can help." Mrs. Cindy, I don't believe in... It's not a question of believing, Michael. It's a question of being prepared for everything. That mare isn't common. You've already noticed that yourself. Mrs. Lucy lived in a small house by the roadside, 15 miles from the ranch. She was known in the region as a healer, a blessing giver, and a midwife. Women came from distant towns to consult her about problems that traditional medicine couldn't solve. When Michael sought her out, she already seemed to be expecting him. "I know why you've come," she said, before he even explained the situation. "Something is growing that shouldn't be growing in the way it's growing." Mrs. Lucy was a small, thin woman of approximately 70 years, with completely white hair tied in a bun and black eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances. Her hands were calloused from work, but they moved with delicacy when she touched the medicinal plants in her yard. "May I see the mare?" "Of course, Mrs. Lucy, but do you really believe you can help?" "It's not a question of helping, son. It's a question of understanding, and sometimes understanding is half the help." In tea. The late afternoon, Mrs. Lucy arrived at the ranch carrying a fabric bag with herbs, a necklace of ancient beads, and some objects that Michael couldn't identify. She walked slowly but with purpose, observing every detail of the property. When they reached the stable, Star immediately raised her head as if she had sensed the woman's presence before even seeing her. Mrs. Lucy stopped at the entrance to the stall, studying the mare in silence for long minutes. "May I touch her?" "Of course." Mrs. Lucy entered the stall slowly, extending her hand toward Star's neck. The moment her fingers touched the black coat, something changed in the air. A profound silence settled in, as if all the sounds of the ranch had ceased simultaneously. "The ma'am." Healer closed her eyes and remained motionless, her hand resting on the mare's flank. For almost 5 minutes neither of them moved. Then she slowly opened her eyes and stepped back. "It's not just a life growing here," she said, her voice carrying seriousness. "It's a link between worlds." "What does that mean?" "It means that what will be born isn't just a foal, it's a bridge, and bridges don't choose who crosses, they just support." Mrs. Lucy began to spread coarse salt around the stall, murmuring words that Michael didn't understand. Then she hung small bronze bells on the stable beams. "Will that protect?" "It will balance. What's coming needs to be born, but needs to be born in peace." That same night, Star went into labor. Michael awoke to Joe Bennett, desperately knocking on the main house door. "Boss Star, I think it's time." They rushed to the stable where they found the mare lying down, breathing heavily. But something was wrong. The contractions were weak and spaced out, as if her body was resisting the natural process. "I'm going to call Dr. Sullivan," said Michael, reaching for his phone. "There won't be time," replied a calm voice behind them. It was Mrs. Lucy, who had arrived without anyone noticing. "How did you know?" "I knew it would be today. I came prepared." She placed her bag on the ground and began removing various items, candles of different colors, a clay bowl, dried herbs, and a bottle with phi, a dark liquid. "Mrs. Cindy, I need hot water and clean towels. Joe Bennett, light these candles and distribute them around the stable. Michael, you stay with me." For the next 2 hours, Mrs. Lucy worked as if conducting an ancient ritual. She spoke softly to Star, applied herbal compresses to specific points on her body, and burned aromatic substances that filled the air with unknown fragrances. The moment of birth was preceded by a sudden storm. Lightning cut through the night sky, thunder made the stable walls tremble, but not a drop of rain fell. The air temperature rose several degrees in a few minutes. "Now," said Mrs. Lucy, her voice barely audible above the noise of the storm. Star made one final effort, and amid the supernatural silence that followed the end of the thunder, Aurora came into the world. The foal was small, like all newborns, but there was something about her that made anyone stop and look with doubled attention. Her coat was black like her mother's, but when the candlelight touched her, bluish reflections danced on her surface like the northern lights. "My God," whispered Michael. Aurora opened her eyes within the first minutes of life, and they shone with a subtle inner light. She didn't cry or make the typical sounds of a newborn foal. Instead, she remained silent, observing each person present with an intelligence that seemed impossible for such a young animal. "She's perfect," said Mrs. Lucy, approaching slowly, "and she's exactly what she should be." In the following minutes, strange phenomena manifested around the stable. The rainwater that finally began to fall glowed when it touched the ground near the building. The bronze bells rang by themselves, producing harmonious melodies that seemed to calm everyone present. Star, although exhausted, remained awake, licking her foal with maternal dedication. But her eyes didn't stray from the people around, as if she were evaluating each of them. "What happens now?" asked Michael. "Now you protect," replied Mrs. Lucy, storing her instruments, "because what was born here will change many things, and not everyone will like that change." When dawn arrived, bringing an unusual silence to the ranch, Michael knew his life had changed forever. Aurora wasn't just a foal. She was the beginning of something he didn't yet fully understand, but which he was willing to protect with his own life. 3 weeks had passed since Aurora's birth, and Sunrise Ranch had transformed into a completely different place. The foal was growing with surprising speed, but what truly impressed were the manifestations that happened around her. Michael observed these changes with a mixture of fascination and growing concern. Aurora not only grew faster than any normal foal, but also demonstrated capabilities that defied any logical explanation. "Boss, come see this," called Joe Bennett one morning, his voice laden with astonishment. In the pasture, near the stable, Aurora stood in the center of a perfect circle, where the grass grew greener and more abundant than in the rest of the field. Small wildflowers had sprouted overnight, forming geometric patterns around her hooves. "Never seen anything like it," murmured the foreman. "It's as if the earth responds to her presence." Even more impressive was how other animals reacted to Aurora. Birds perched on nearby branches without showing fear. Adult horses approached her with unusual reverence, and even wild animals from the region appeared at the edges of the property, observing from a distance as if attracted by an invisible force. Mrs. Cindy also reported strange phenomena in the main house. "Michael, the clocks in the house are stopping every night at 3 in the morning. And when I pass near the stable, I feel as if time passes more slowly." "What do you mean, Mrs. Cindy?" "It's hard to explain. It's as if each minute lasts longer when I'm near Aurora, and sometimes I swear I hear music coming from nowhere." Michael had begun keeping a detailed diary of all occurrences. The notes accumulated day after day, temperatures that varied without meteorological explanation, electronic devices that functioned intermittently, and vivid dreams that everyone on the ranch shared. The dreams were always the same: a horse of golden light galloping through landscapes that didn't exist on Earth, protecting children from formless shadows. Several people in the region began reporting similar dreams, always involving a luminous equine figure that brought a sense of peace and protection. It was Mrs. Lucy who offered the first plausible explanation. "She's not just growing in our world," she said during one of her weekly visits. "Part of her exists in another place, another time. That's why the clocks stop. That's why time seems different near her." "Another place? What do you mean?" "There are worlds beyond what we can see, Michael. Aurora is a bridge between them. That's why she was born here at this moment. There was a need. Need for what?" Mrs. Lucy remained silent for a moment, watching Aurora play in the pasture with a lightness that seemed to defy gravity. "For balance. There are forces in nature that need to be balanced, and sometimes that balance only comes through special beings." The healer's words gained more meaning when Michael began to notice that the ranch itself was changing. Harvests were more abundant, animals fell ill less frequently, and there was a general sense of harmony that he had never experienced before. But this tranquility was interrupted one December afternoon when 3 black cars parked at the entrance to the property. The same men in suits who had appeared weeks before exited the vehicles, but this time they brought equipment, cameras, measuring devices, and briefcases that suggested sophisticated scientific instruments. The leader of the group walked to the porch where Michael awaited them. "Mr. Anderson, we have our legal documentation," he said, extending a set of official papers. "Federal Health Inspection Order, authorized by the Department of Agriculture. Michael examined the documents. They were correct, with appropriate seals and signatures. What exactly do you intend to do? Examine the mare and her offspring. Collect samples for analysis. Perform environmental measurements. Reports indicate anomalies that need to be investigated. What kind of anomalies? That will be determined during our investigation. Michael knew he could no longer delay. Legally, he had no choice but to allow access. But he also knew that exposing Aurora to these men could have unpredictable consequences. You may examine the animals, but I want to be present during all procedures. Naturally. The men set up their equipment in the stable with military efficiency. Measuring devices were positioned around the stalls, cameras installed at strategic angles, and instruments that Michael didn't recognize were connected and calibrated. When they approached Aurora, something extraordinary happened. All electronic. Equipment failed simultaneously. Cameras stopped recording, meters zeroed out, and portable computers shut down without explanation. The men tried to restart the devices several times, but nothing worked in the foal's presence. Electromagnetic interference, murmured one of the technicians. Never seen anything like it. Aurora, in turn, remained completely calm, observing the strangers with her bright eyes. When one of the men tried to approach her with a syringe for blood collection, the foal simply moved away, with movements that seemed more like dancing than walking. We can't get close to her, said the technician to the leader. It's as if she knows exactly what we intend to do. After 2 hours of frustrated attempts, the men gathered their broken equipment and prepared to leave. This doesn't end here, Mr. Anderson, said the leader, clearly displeased. We'll return with more appropriate equipment. You can return whenever you want. Aurora will be here. After the investigators' departure, Michael approached Aurora, who was now grazing peacefully as if nothing had happened. You knew what they wanted, didn't you? He asked softly. The foal raised her head and gazed at him with those impossible eyes. For a moment, Michael was absolutely certain that Aurora had understood every word. That night, Mrs. Lucy appeared at the ranch without being called. They'll return, she said simply, and next time they'll bring methods that Aurora won't be able to neutralize so easily. What can we do? Prepare. The moment of choice is coming, Michael. You'll have to decide between protecting Aurora or surrendering her to the world. And whatever your choice, it will change not only your life but the lives of many people. As he watched Aurora sleeping peacefully beside Star, Michael knew that the true test was only beginning. The dawn of December 23rd brought with it a dense fog that completely covered Sunrise Ranch. Michael awoke with the sensation that something definitive was about to happen. The air seemed charged with electricity, and a supernatural silence had settled over the property. When he went out to check on the animals, he found Aurora standing in the center of the main pasture, motionless as a statue. Around her, the fog formed perfect concentric circles, and a golden light emanated softly from her coat. "She's preparing," said a voice behind Michael. It was Mrs. Lucy, who had arrived before dawn, as if she knew this would be the decisive day. Preparing for what? For the choice. Today you'll discover why Aurora was born here and what that means for all of us. During the morning, strange signs multiplied throughout the ranch. Birds migrated in unusual formations, all heading to the property. Wild animals emerged from the woods and positioned themselves at the edges of the pastures, observing Aurora with silent reverence. Plants flowered simultaneously, creating a carpet of vibrant colors that extended as far as the eye could see. Joe Bennett reported that compasses spun endlessly, and Mrs. Cindy said that all mirrors in the house reflected landscapes that didn't exist in reality. "Boss, something's happening that's beyond our understanding," said the foreman, clearly disturbed. "The other workers are afraid. Some left during the night." Michael understood their fear, but he also knew he couldn't abandon Aurora at this crucial moment. Around noon, a fleet of official vehicles arrived at the ranch. They weren't just the previous investigators, but also military personnel, scientists, and people wearing clothes that Michael couldn't identify. There were at least 20 people, all carrying sophisticated equipment. The leader of the original group approached with a more serious posture than on previous occasions. "Mr. Anderson, we have direct orders from Washington. The animal will be removed from the property for studies in a federal laboratory." "On what basis?" "Anomalous seismic records, alterations in the local magnetic field, reports of inexplicable phenomena within a radius of 30 miles. This animal represents a potential risk to national security." Michael looked at Aurora, who remained in the same location since dawn, surrounded by an aura of light that grew increasingly intense. "And if I refuse?" "That's not an option, Mr. Anderson." It was then that Mrs. Lucy stepped forward, walking slowly until she stood between the officials and the stable. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, her voice carrying an authority that contrasted with her fragile appearance. "This animal cannot be removed from here. Ma'am, please step aside. This is official business. I am Mrs. Lucy, and I know about these lands more than any of you. If you forcibly remove Aurora from here, the consequences will be catastrophic." The QE leader hesitated for a moment, as if something in the healer's presence made him reconsider, but he soon recovered his professional composure. "We have our orders. The animal will be removed today." It was at this moment that Aurora moved for the first time since morning. She walked slowly to where the group stood, and her approach was accompanied by phenomena that left everyone paralyzed. The air around her rippled like water, creating visual distortions that made people see landscapes superimposed on reality. Sounds from other worlds echoed in the wind, harmonious melodies, voices whispering in unknown languages, and a deep hum that seemed to come from the center of the earth. The officials' equipment not only failed, but began to slowly disintegrate. Cameras turned to dust, measuring devices transformed into light and disappeared, and weapons became harmless to the touch. "My God," murmured one of the scientists. "She's altering the molecular structure of objects." Aurora stopped a few meters from the group and gazed at each person with her luminous eyes. At that moment, all those present experienced the same vision. They saw the Earth as it was millennia ago, covered by a network of energy that connected all living beings. They saw how this network had weakened over time, and how specific points on the planet served as anchors to maintain balance. Sunrise Ranch was one of those points, and Aurora was the guardian destined to protect it. "She's not just an animal," said Mrs. Lucy, her voice echoing strangely in the charged air. "She's a guardian of the pathways, sent to re-establish the connection between worlds. If you remove her from here, the rupture will spread like waves, affecting the entire region." The healer's words were accompanied by images that appeared in everyone's mind. Cities where natural harmony had been broken, places where disconnection from the earth caused inexplicable problems, and the vision of how everything could balance again if the guardians were respected. The leader of the officials was visibly shaken. His training hadn't prepared him to deal with something that transcended any known category. This is impossible," he murmured, watching his own equipment dissolve in his hands. Michael stepped forward, finally understanding his role in this situation. "You can try to take her, but you won't succeed. Aurora isn't anyone's property. She's a guardian, and I'm just the protector who was chosen to ensure her safety. Mr. Anderson, you don't have the authority to make this decision." "Yes, I do. This is my land, and this is my animal. But more important than that, I am the human, guardian chosen to protect something much greater than all of us." Aurora whinnied softly, and the sound propagated like music through the air. Immediately all the strange phenomena ceased. The light diminished, the sounds from other worlds silenced, and a profound peace settled over the ranch. The officials looked at each other, clearly lost about how to proceed. Their equipment was destroyed, their orders made no sense in the face of what they had witnessed, and Aurora's presence left them with an inexplicable certainty that interrupting this balance would be a terrible mistake. "We need "We need to consult our superiors," said the leader, his voice now lacking its previous authority. "Do that," replied Michael. "But do it far from here. Aurora and her mother stay where they belong." As the officials withdrew in silence, carrying the remains of their disintegrated equipment, Michael felt a definitive transformation in his own nature. He was no longer just a rancher trying to protect a special animal. He was the guardian chosen to protect a force that kept the world in balance. And when Aurora approached him, gently placing her muzzle in his hand, Michael knew he had made the right choice. 6 months had passed since the confrontation that forever changed the destiny of Sunrise Ranch. The property had transformed into a place where the natural and the extraordinary coexisted in perfect harmony, attracting the respectful attention of people from around the world. Michael woke every morning with the certainty that his life had gained a greater purpose. Aurora, now almost a year old, had grown and become a magnificent horse, whose presence radiated a peace that could be felt miles away. Her black coat shone with golden reflections under the sunlight, and her movements continued to have that ethereal quality that defied the laws of physics. The ranch prospered like never before. Harvests were abundant, animals enjoyed perfect health, and visitors arrived daily to experience the unique sensation of harmony that emanated from the place. Michael had transformed part of the property into a center for studies on natural balance, where respectful researchers could observe the phenomena without disturbing the peace of the environment. Mrs. Lucy became a constant presence at the ranch, serving as a bridge between ancestral knowledge and the modern need to understand the inexplicable. She had trained Michael and other local residents in ancient practices of protection and balance, ensuring that Aurora's work continued to be protected. "She's no longer just your horse," she said one afternoon, watching Aurora graze with Star in the main field. "She's the guardian of all of us, and you, Michael, are her guardian." Joe Bennett, initially skeptical, had become one of Aurora's most dedicated protectors. The foreman developed an intuitive understanding of the ranch's special rhythms, being able to predict when extraordinary phenomena were about to happen. "Boss, more people arriving at the gate," he announced, pointing to a family approaching with small children. Visitors regularly came to Sunrise Ranch. Word about the special place spread discreetly through networks of people seeking healing, peace, and connection with something greater. Michael had established clear rules: absolute respect for animals and nature, limited stay to a few hours, and prohibition of photographs or recordings of Aurora. Children were always the most affected by the guardian's presence. They approached her without fear, and Aurora demonstrated a special tenderness with the young visitors. Many families reported that children with developmental problems or emotional traumas showed significant improvements after spending time at the ranch. Mrs. Cindy, who initially feared the supernatural changes, became the perfect hostess for visitors. She prepared teas with herbs grown on the property and shared stories about the ranch's transformation, always with the simple wisdom that earned people's trust. "In the beginning, I was afraid," she confessed to a family from Boston, "but then I understood that fear and miracle sometimes go hand in hand. What's important is choosing which of the two will guide our life." Dr. Helen Sullivan had returned to the ranch several times, no longer as a skeptical veterinarian, but as a researcher, fascinated by the possibilities of integration between science and extraordinary phenomena. She carefully documented the changes in the health of animals in the region, observing how Aurora's presence positively influenced the entire local ecosystem. "Michael, the data is incontestable," she said during one of her visits. "The rate of diseases in animals within a radius of 30 miles has drastically decreased. Plants grow healthier, water quality has improved, and there's an ecological balance that defies conventional explanations." The government officials never officially returned, but Michael knew the ranch was discreetly monitored from a distance. Reports reached him that environmental protection policies in the region had been strengthened, and that government scientists were silently studying the environmental benefits that spread from Sunrise Ranch. Aurora, in turn, grew fully assuming her role as guardian. She developed her own rituals, Morning walks around the perimeter of the ranch, moments of meditation at specific points on the property, and special interactions with visitors who came seeking healing or guidance. Michael learned to recognize the signs that indicated when Aurora was working in her function as guardian. In these moments, a subtle aurora danced around the horse, plants moved without wind, and almost inaudible music filled the air. On an especially significant afternoon, Michael received a letter that would change his perspective on the reach of Aurora's mission. The letter came from an international university, signed by a group of researchers who studied energy points around the world. They had identified Sunrise Ranch as one of the places where natural balance had been restored in an extraordinary way, and they would like to establish a partnership for non-invasive studies. "They want to learn, not exploit," Michael said to Mrs. Lucy, showing her the correspondence. "Then perhaps it's time to expand the protection. Aurora isn't the only guardian in the world. There are others in other places, and perhaps the time has come to connect them." The idea of a worldwide network of guardians and protectors filled Michael with hope. He imagined other ranches, other special places, other people like him who had been chosen to protect forces that kept the world in balance. That night, Michael walked to the pasture where Aurora rested under the stars. The horse raised her head and greeted him with a soft whinny that sounded like music. "You knew this was going to happen from the beginning, didn't you?" asked Michael, caressing the silky neck of the animal. Aurora gazed at him with those luminous eyes, and for a moment, Michael was absolutely certain that there was total understanding between them. Not just between man and animal, but between guardian and guardian, between two souls chosen to protect something greater than both. As he watched Aurora return to her peaceful rest, Michael reflected on the journey that had brought them there. It had begun with the simple desire to breed noble lineage horses. It had transformed into the discovery that some beings transcend all known categories, existing to maintain the balance between worlds. Sunrise Ranch was no longer just a rural property in the countryside of Georgia. It was a beacon of hope, an example of how the extraordinary and the everyday could coexist, and a testimony that there were still forces in the world, dedicated to healing and balance. And at the center of it all was Aurora, the guardian of the pathways, whose simple presence reminded everyone that magic had not disappeared from the world. It just patiently waited for those wise enough to recognize it and brave enough to protect it. In the vast lands of Sunrise Ranch, under the starry mantle of the American Southeast, a new era had begun. An era where human and celestial guardians worked together to keep the flame of hope alive in a world that had forgotten